Hello and welcome to Learn to Listen. Today we are joined by Armando Sanchez. Mondo, welcome. I am so happy to have you here. It's been a long time coming that we have spoken about having you come on my podcast. So very excited. Before we get kicked off into all the different topics that I want to ask you about today, say hi to everyone, give yourself an intro. Super glad to have you here.
Sweet. Thank you. Glad to be here. My name is Armando Sanchez. Currently, I work as a product manager based in Indianapolis, originally from California, so new to the Midwest, but I definitely love the ethos out here, and it's grown on me a ton. I definitely thought the 4 years in South Bend for undergrad were more than enough, but bought a house, so I'm here for a little while longer at least.
Yeah, very, very adult of you to buy a house in Indianapolis. It is a great area. So as Mondo hinted at, him and I both went to Notre Dame. He is the class above me, so class of 2020. But funny enough, we never crossed paths in undergrad, and it was the Orr Fellowship that brought us together. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with the Orr Fellowship, it's a 2-year post-grad program for personal and professional development. Mondo is, of course, the year older than I am and just graduated out of Orr Fellowship. So that was one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about and like going into a little bit of your background, being from California, West Coast, moving to the Midwest. As you know, I'm from East Coast, moved to the Midwest. And now for the unforeseeable future, we'll continue to be here. What was it what was it like graduating Notre Dame, coming into the workforce? Yes, during COVID. And like, can you describe what that whole process was like? And then now that you're 3 years into the working world, what do you wish you would have known, like when you first started your career?
Yeah, definitely. So pretty wild to think that, yeah, coming up on year three of being a working, contributing member of society.
Hmm.
Um, and in terms of the transition to work, I mean, the whole recruiting and aspect of work as a whole, I was a very late bloomer. So I majored in political science, thought for sure I was going to be going to law school. Did everything I could to prepare myself, had a lot of conversations, passed, had the application, took the LSAT, and I ended up missing my goal score by like a point. And instead of, kind of freaking out or trying to take the test again because I did not enjoy that process. I kind of saw that as the straw that broke the camel's back and was just like a sign to like do something else, at least, and like get some more exposure. So looking for a job was pretty new for me. Everything else I'd done related in some way or form to becoming a lawyer. And when I found Orr, I was looking at other jobs and I'd basically just walk and be like, I wanted to be an attorney and now I don't. And like, how can you help me get a
Where
job?
do I go?
Yeah, what does this look like? And I would literally just talk to the recruiters and it ended up going pretty well. Like I had a lot of really good interviews and conversations with people and opportunities to pursue. And Orr was just the one that really paved a very clear path forward and was very smooth. And I just enjoyed the opportunity, honestly, to what I looked at it, have 2 years where I couldn't get fired
Hmm.
theoretically. I'd have to really mess up to get fired. And I was like, all right, well, if I really want to go to law school, then I need to be studying a lot. So like that'll be totally fine. And that was my mindset coming in. And so when I started working, I didn't realize that it was going to be very enjoyable for me. And I think it was
What a
just like,
funny concept.
yeah, I was like, you know, it's like live to work, work till you die, and then maybe you'll have a retirement and enjoy some of it. But I really enjoyed the aspect of meeting new people and solving problems and bringing a different perspective. I got into tech, so I was a tech project manager out of political science. Uh, and I had no experience in the field. So it was all just a ton of learning, and I hadn't learned at that clip in a way that was not scholastic, like having your professional career be tied to the amount of information that you can intake and then digest and spit back out and make sense to other people of was very different. And I enjoyed that process. So I got really excited to learn about new things, to meet new people and collaborate with others. So if there was one thing I would have known going into that would have been how much of your job is going to be just a continuous learning process, and nobody has any answers for how anything could get done or should get done. It's a like a big group project, and I think I put a lot of pressure on myself early on to not mess up, and that's just unrealistic. So
Yeah.
wish I would have had some more realism going in.
Yeah.
It saved me some like days where I was just super hard on myself.
Yeah, that's a great point. I don't think I've ever thought about how before starting work I like anticipated that it would be like perhaps less fun than school or like less fun because you're like school is like you're around your friends, right? Or um there's like that social aspect that's expected when you're going to school and then it kind of like everyone's like, "Oh, after graduation like that drops off and then you just have work and then you're doing that
Hmm.
until you retire."
Yeah.
So I love that you kind of painted that picture. Why do you think like okay, so why do you think that as like we have that perception of work? I'm curious. Like I know you'll chase this meta question with me like because I don't know if it's a generational thing because I feel like now work is becoming more of that like choose your own adventure, choose what you is important to you. Like you can work remotely in some jobs, you can choose to go into the office, you can like work culture is becoming more important, connecting with people, social media, it's easier to have like more access to more information. Why do you think growing up we kind of had that perception of work like perhaps not being as enjoyable as luckily we're both finding it now?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of aspects to that, I think, to unpack. I'm a first generation college graduate. Both of my parents worked very blue collar careers and jobs, and a majority of my family did as well. So that's the scope that I understood work from. Like
Mm-hmm.
my dad would have work outings, where there'd be like barbecues or things like that, and he'd have his friends from work. But I mean, he worked graveyard shifts. I like there'd be days I wouldn't see him for like weeks on end because he'd be at work, I'd be at school, we wouldn't overlap, and like that was work for me. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't see work as like talking through problems about how technology can uh solve a problem and help people down the road and think of it in that way. And so I mean there's even like a funny story with my nephew. Like I was on my computer at home back in California working, and then he was like, "Do you just play video games all day? Or like, what are
Oh
you
my gosh.
doing? Like, are you working?" And he just like popped up. He's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "In a meeting." And then I was like, "I'm in a meeting, dude. Like, what are you talking about?" Um, and then I popped him up, and then he was just what is this, because his dad worked with my dad, like my brother works with my dad,
Mm-hmm.
and very similar, like there are times where he's working graveyard and his mom goes into work too. So that's just the perspective of work that blue collar families or a lot of people just face. So that's what made my like perception. But the cool thing was like that same nephew asked me, he's like, "Can you take me to the beach?" And then I was like, "Dude, I have work. Like, I can't take you to the beach." And he just looked at me, he's like, "Just bring your laptop." Like, what are you
Oh,
talking
oh
about?
my God.
And so, like, even as like a 5-year-old, he understood like some of the things that you touched on the flexibility that working from a computer, having a job that isn't tied to an office or tied to the rigidity of a typical 9 to 5 is, I mean, I didn't even explain it to him like he was a 5-year-old. He just understood it. And it was
Mm-hmm.
like insane to think about. So long-winded way of saying like how I have how I grew up understanding work to now where I am doing work, there was just a huge disconnect. And so the experience in that kind of continued learning process has filled in those gaps. And then the thing that I think I appreciate the most is I get to share that with my family, being my nephew, being, my dad, anyone around him, just like those kind of opportunities. Like my mom is doing a certification program right now through the same scholarship program that I'm doing, and like that's the ethos and essence of like a 21st century work culture is like anyone at any age can learn how to use a laptop, how to build skills, and how to like change her trajectory. Now she in the future will have opportunities to work from home, and it's just game changing. So I've experienced
Yeah.
a lot of that dynamic and spectrum.
Yeah. No, that's super interesting. Like I wouldn't have thought of the like the story that you told with your nephew of like the age difference of like, oh, of course, 5-year-old is going to understand like his father leaves for work every day and leaving the home is like like that's all right. Your nephew probably knows. It's like he just leaves and then comes back. But then seeing you also working, but you're staying at home, I'm sure is like you said, like he was like able to make the connections, but of course the beach story, that's really cute that he's like, just bring your laptop.
Yeah.
Um, but I love that you touched upon those differences and like I love that you reflected with your childhood as well and like growing up of what you saw with your parents. And so what was it now that you just mentioned the scholarship program that you shared with your mother and she's now going through at the same time, but can you like I guess tell us about what it was like to be a first generation college grad for your family? Like walk us through kind of the emotions that you felt like in undergrad and now post grad.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's still crazy to think about the amount of things that had to have gone right that did, and just the way that things played out.
Hmm.
It's something that I think about a lot because just statistically speaking, it should not have happened.
Yeah,
Um, and so I guess looking at it from the beginning, no one in my family had ever gone to college or explained how to go to college or any of those sorts of things. And I come from a massive family. So my mom, she has 7 sisters. So there's 8 girls and there's one boy, and each of them had at least 3 kids, as many as 7. That's just like on my mom's side of the family.
huge
And like my
family.
dad
Yeah.
has like 5 siblings. They all have like 3 or 4 kids too. So everyone pretty much worked like really blue collar jobs from the Central Valley of California. So familiar with like Cesar Chavez and the agricultural influence in the Central Valley is huge. Still, it's like the breadbasket of the world. Anything you look at, like fruit, any of that stuff, you look at it, a lot of dairy products, it's more than likely going to come from the Central Valley of California. And so
Hmm.
that was the ecosystem I operated in, my understanding of like jobs. And that's what a lot of my family members did. No one really would do like the go be a chemical engineer and then work on the product sample and be like running a forklift within a warehouse or kind of doing the manual labor aspect of it. Um, and no one really had gone to university or to college, even at a community college level, to then enter that different from like that different workspace from blue collar to white collar. And early on, my mom literally just told me, "You're gonna go to college." And she had told like my other siblings, but for some reason it just resonated with me in my core. And or like young, I started believing it. Like 4 or 5 years old, I'd be in my classes, like, yeah, I'm going to college. And it was just a belief. Like it was just unshakable belief from nowhere, realistically, because like no one knew what this path would look like. It's like, just go to college. And it was like, all right, I'm gonna go to college. And so definitely took a village to understand what that would take. So definitely at key points, um, teachers would kind of tap me on the shoulder and I would explain to them my scenarios or whatever. And they'd vouch for me to be in honors classes or to do X, Y, and Z and to get involved. And that process led to in high school. I thought I was going to go to college for sports more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I had some teachers and some counselors say like, hey, you're really smart. Like, you don't necessarily need to do that. And I got really involved with like student government, which opened a whole nother path of doing things and experiencing things and moving outside of my bubble. Because though we lived in California, like we went to Disneyland once and I was like 7.
Whoa.
Yeah, like
Okay.
we didn't travel, like
Uh-huh.
we just didn't have money to travel. We stayed where we lived, and I don't think I left the state of California until I was like 16.
Yeah. Wait,
So,
was that with the student government that you traveled
and
to
that's how
visit?
I left. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, that's what I thought you meant. And then I
Yeah.
was like, wait, maybe he's just talking about normal like Disneyland with your family. But I was like, student government going to Disneyland. That's so
So we
crazy.
went to Disneyland for the student government thing. I did go to Disneyland. So everyone believes that everyone in California just like lives at Disneyland. It's like, oh, blah, blah, blah. And that's just a misconception. Like it's
Yeah.
far, it's expensive, it's difficult to get to. Like, so for us, that just wasn't a reality. And we had gone one time. So I went when I was 7.
Okay.
Never went to like Sequoia National Park, which is like 45 minutes from where I lived. We go to the beach every now and again. It's like 2 hours away, but we didn't travel much. Like you just didn't do those things. And then I got involved in the student leadership stuff and the student government stuff. And like they did host a conference at Disneyland and like I got to stay in the resort and hang out and see stuff. And it's like that program is what allowed me to see a lot of different pieces of the United States. Like they allowed me to go to New Mexico and go on a leadership conference and meet new people, go to Washington, go to Washington the state, and go to Washington
Mhm.
D.C. Like they really provided
Whoa.
a super strong platform to expand my bubble and like learn more within. It was like a microcosm of like in California, and then it was like okay, nationwide. And that really started solidifying like, all right, I'm focusing on school, sports. I stopped doing sports like sophomore year of high school. And that was super controversial because not many people do sports like either. So it's like not only are people not going to college, people aren't playing sports. It's really just like there was a ton of pressure there for things like that.
Hmm.
Um, but I made that decision that like, hey, I need to focus on this bigger goal of like getting to college. Like that's way more important than playing any sport.
Hmm.
Um, and so that village of people that really just believed in me and kind of pointed me in the right direction helped me out a ton and helped me navigate the whole process because I couldn't go to my mom or to my dad and ask them to fill out forms or ask them, you know, what was next or to review my essays or to do this or to do that. It was leaning a lot on my teachers, leaning a lot on my mentors, and leaning a lot on the scholarship programs that were available because they spelled it out.
Hmm.
Like Questbridge scholarship program, huge scholarship program for first gen students. They lay out like this is how you're going to apply. Excuse me, this is everything you're going to need. So then I would take that recipe and then be like, Mom, I need this. Dad, I need this. Counselor, I need this. Teacher, I need this. Teacher, I need this. I took the tests and like I was filling out scholarships to take the tests and to be in the classes. And so basically took that menu or that roadmap on how to get to college and
Hmm.
just executed it. And then getting in brought its own can of worms and
I'm sure.
things. I I definitely I applied to a ton of schools. So I applied to like 25 schools. Um, I didn't step foot on a college campus before I like went to college. And so it was all just so
Interesting.
foreign. Yeah, like I didn't do
Yeah.
visits, like we couldn't go and visit campuses. Actually, okay, I did. I didn't visit, but the student leadership had a program at University of California, Santa Barbara. But like
Mm.
we did leadership stuff there. We weren't like I wasn't like, what's your course curriculum look like?
Yeah.
Or what does this program look like? Or what are your scholarship opportunities? Or what does it look like to be a student? It was like, this is on the beach and it's nice. Like
Yeah.
they're feeding
You've
me and
just
they
seen the
wait for me
building.
to be
Like,
here. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So it was all super foreign. Got in to Notre Dame through Questbridge. And yeah, I mean, that was just that's a moment I'll never forget. Like I was sitting on my grandpa's couch. He had passed away like a year before, but we'd all bought in. Like it's like I'm going to college. Like I told him, like I'm going to college. My grandma, I'm going to college. Everyone was like, going to college. And so I was sitting on his couch, got an email. I wasn't supposed to get an email from Notre Dame, but I did, and it was the welcome home, and like I refreshed it, turned my phone off, like turned it back on. I was like, what is going on? My mom was on the porch, and then I just looked at it again, and I was like it's real. And I went
Hmm.
outside, and it was like I just got into Notre Dame, like, and she screamed, and like everyone woke up, and like my grandma came out of the room, like, what happened? What happened? And I was like, I just got into college. Like, she doesn't know what Notre Dame is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Right.
I'm going to college. And it was just crazy. Like that whole process was crazy. And that started like that was in December. And the rest of them kind of came in, but it ended up being like either stay in California or go to Notre Dame. And there were like a lot of things that I weighed into that decision. Um, Things that pretty typically like other people don't have to weigh in. Like one thing that was huge for me was I was a very much big part of my family's day-to-day life and kind of facilitating between people, communicating with people, helping out with my brother's kids and helping out my sister and um, just helping in general, helping everyone.
Yeah.
And so when your family's X size big things pop up all the time, whether it be birthday parties, whether it be baptisms, whether it be, oh, this happened, or just people being in the hospital, like every
It's a
week there's
whole,
something
yeah.
going
It
on.
could fill your
It's like
calendar.
never ends. And
Yeah.
so I had to really take that into consideration. It was like if I'm at a school in California, there's no way that I would easily be able to say or be able to think about the repercussions of saying like, oh, well, I'm not going to such and such event. Like I have to study for an exam. Or like if I got called in an emergency, it's like I can't go. Like I have a test or these things. Um, and so the big decision for me that I had to weigh was like, what's going to allow me to fully just invest and have no
Mm.
excuses. And that was Notre Dame. And like there were many, many reasons that Notre Dame was a clear yes for me. And I think it was like the university selects you, you don't select it type thing. Felt at home there. But that main reason was like I knew I'd be able to focus. And at the end
Yeah.
of the day, I went to college with like $500 and I was like paid for all the stuff to fill my dorm room and already had to pay off my flight to get there. So I had no money.
Hmm.
And it was like, if something happened, like, I'm sorry, I can't go back. I'm here.
Yeah. I'm
I'm at
for
I'm
better
at
for
school
worse, I'm
now.
here. Yeah. I'm in
Yeah.
Indiana.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so that was just the easiest way for me to really focus and ensure that I wouldn't do anything that would jeopardize my academic performance or the ability to like graduate college, right? Because getting in is a lot easier than graduating.
Yeah.
That's a common plight amongst first gen students is like colleges are very happy to bring students in, but getting them through to the finish line is one of the most difficult things. And so once I was there, I mean, it was tough. Like, definitely cried. Like the first night, I was like, "What the hell did I do? Like,
Why am
why
I
did I
in
do this
Indiana?
for?" Yeah, like my roommate wasn't in the room yet, and I was sad and like realized how poor I was, and just like so much stuff. I missed my family, and I was just like, I can't do this. But there was literally no other option. There
Yeah,
was
I'm
no
sure a
way.
ton of emotions like going
Yeah.
through all of that, but you, I'm happy to hear at least you had the faith that you're like, okay, I know I need to be here. I know it's good for me to be here, even though in the moment it's a lot of change. Like
Yeah.
just picking up, leaving home, especially when all of your family is in California.
Mhm.
Um, it was hard for me, and my family is only a family of five in Jersey, and the rest of our families in Canada, right? So like
Yeah.
I can only imagine having all your family members, all the events that you know you're gonna miss,
Mhm.
weigh in on you while you're there alone, and you're like, this is a new space. I've never been here before.
Yeah.
Um, kind of having a little bit of a moment where you're like, oh God, what am I doing? And then hopefully, you start finding your way through freshman year. Um, welcome week starts and
Yeah. All that
hopefully you
good stuff.
feel, yeah, you feel a little bit better.
Mhm.
Um, quick question. This was a while back, but what did you mean by like you weren't meant to get the email saying you got into Notre Dame?
Yeah, so Questbridge, they have certain schools that will, if you do, because Questbridge's application is in the first week of November.
Okay.
It's from primarily early decision. And so you rank all your schools and you apply, and they'll let you know. And so I didn't get early decision anywhere. I applied to like 12 schools. So that was also like, I guess I'm not going to college. Like what's going on? Um,
Uh-huh.
and there are certain schools where you'll get moved from early decision to early action to give you another chance.
Mm-hmm.
And Notre Dame wasn't on that list. So I thought
Gotcha.
that the other schools I'd be waiting until April. Uh,
Mm.
and I ended up talking to the guy who actually made that change with Questbridge. And I was telling him the same story, and he was like, yeah, I changed that. And I was like,
Oh my gosh.
whoa, like that's insane. I
You're
just
like,
gave him a hug.
whoa. It's a simulation. We live in a
Yeah,
simulation. That's what that
give
tells
me a
me.
hug, dude. Like that's unreal. So yeah, that's what that meant.
Okay. Okay, gotcha. I didn't know if you meant it like literally you weren't like something in the text like in the logistical part you were like not supposed to get it or if you just meant like in general you're like, I shouldn't be getting it like that. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
so
no.
cool that you got to meet the person that was able to help you in that process. And then one other thing, which thank you for providing all that background. I think it's so fascinating
Yeah.
even having known you for the past 2 years. It's always fun to like sit down and sift through some of the stuff we don't get to talk about
Mhm.
in our backgrounds. But you said like the pressure to stop sports, or there was a lot of like, I guess, um, ambiguity or, just, yeah, pressure, I guess is the best word. How did you
Mhm.
like deal with that or process? Because you're pretty like even keeled in terms
Mhm.
of how you go about your everyday life. But I could
Yeah.
see if like sports was always the end all be all, shifting to like academics, I could see that being a little bit of a point of friction.
It definitely was. And it was for a lot of reasons. Like as a former athlete, like a lot of your friends
Yeah.
uh, come from those bonds on the field and the practice, etc. And those bonds reach with coaches, those bonds reach with family members. And it was just the best decision for me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what it came down to. So it was hard for sure. Like, I'm pretty sure my parents weren't really fully on board with it. A majority of my family members like were 100% not on board with it. They're very upset. Um, And it was difficult. I mean, I was wrestling varsity like freshman and sophomore year. Knew the coach well, was primed for a really good season. Football wise, I was definitely going to continue playing and eventually start. And I mean, in the microcosm that is high school, it's like that's definitely the biggest thing, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Um, and from like a social setting, that was definitely difficult. And from a familial setting, it was difficult. So it was like being smushed between like everyone else basically saying you're making the wrong decision, um, and just taking a gamble. But
Hmm.
I'd done my research, like I thought through exactly what the type of opportunity, focusing on school and doing like focusing on student leadership and other volunteer opportunities and really investing in that, what those pros and cons were. Um, and at the end of the day, I could see like a bigger picture of what can happen and what the long-term vision was. And some of the people that I like confided in, like it was it was really interesting because some people were like kind of like, don't do it. But I explained to them that kind of vision, like, hey, like other people that have done these programs and have done X, Y, and Z, like they've ended up at these schools. And like I know based on where my family is economically, like if I get into these schools, like can get some pretty good scholarships. And like some people were receptive to that, and other people were like, that's a shot in the dark.
Yeah.
Like what are you doing? But after I ended up getting into Notre Dame and kind of figuring out all the financial aid stuff and basically getting a full ride, it was like all those other people were like, dang, dude, like you called it, like you called your shot. Like that's crazy.
Yeah, funny
um,
how the narrative flips, right? Like
yeah, it
once you
was like,
get
oh my God, you're my favorite student, or like you're my favorite like athlete or whatever. And so it was one of those things where it was just I had that belief in like that goal of getting to college really, I think helped me be able to look at it from a bigger perspective rather than being like, damn, I'm not going to be able to play football with my friends, or um, my family can't come and support me on the field anymore, or anything like that. So, yeah, it was hard. Definitely a tough decision. Still here to
yeah.
chat about
Yeah.
it.
People listening from like your high school are like, "Oh my God, I remember that now."
Yeah.
No, that I think that speaks a lot to like the confidence and self-awareness that I've seen, which is so, I mean, it's just I applaud you for having that in high school too, because I feel like I, at least myself, know that a lot of my confidence was gained in college. And so, like me, I in high school, oh my, I was trying to do everything and like
Mhm.
relatively successful at it. Um, and so I can only imagine like sports was such a huge part of my life, right, in high school and evidently college. But if I had to make that decision where it was like clubs and stuff like that, I wasn't super involved with um our student government, but your student government it sounds like it was just way more extensive than ours. Like I was our God, I think like secretary, maybe? Yes, class
Mhm.
secretary. And it was like just meetings like before school and we would like help with events and stuff. It wasn't traveling and leadership
Yeah.
conferences, right? Like it was more just like volunteering on the weekends that I could do like every now and then, but sports was such a big part of my life and just all, like you said, my friends and everything. Um, so yeah, I think if I had been asked to stop sport, then it would have definitely um pushed my like confidence and awareness and like willpower to do that if I had to choose like academics or sport. So I applaud you for having done it. Um,
Definitely. No, it was difficult. But again, like, so in terms of the student leadership thing, and also speaking to like the serendipity of just dominoes that fell that were like unreal in the succession that they happened, that kind of allowed me to really be in a position to make that decision, was the school had gotten a grant to do student leadership like to invest more
Mm,
in student leadership and to invest more in student activities and student government. And that allowed us, thankfully, there's a high school teacher of mine that was super involved. Like, had to have had a high school teacher that was super involved in student leadership at the state level, had to have had him get a grant, had to have gotten the grant, and then had to have fit on a schedule to have the director of that program come and host an event. So that's how I met her. And at that event, I was sweeping the floor as the event was ending. And there were people talking to her about how to get involved with the organization. And she had told my teacher, like, after, she's like, hey, like, who was the kid sweeping the floor?
mm,
And it was like, she was like, that, I want to talk to him. And all of these things like happen. And then she's basically like, talked to some of the people because it was like the state student government thing of California. Um,
okay.
and she was like, talk to some of the people on the board, et cetera, et cetera. And then I did. And then I had those conversations like, can you play sports? Like, what does it look like? Where are you going to college? Like, how can this really play out?
Mm-hmm.
And through that interview process and learning, then I was like, all right, I'm going to send it. And if I get on the board, I do. And then I ended up getting on the board and then being the president of the board. And that's how, like, all of the other stuff that kind of filled in the gaps of a pretty crazy experience of being able to travel the country and meet new people and go up and down the state of California as a 16, 17-year-old kid kind of happened. So
Yeah, good for her for that's a true like level what was it, level 5 leader or
she's
um
the epitome of a great leader, 100%.
yeah, to
So
like see you helping out and doing the the work of like just without being asked, like sweeping the floors, like and
yeah,
helping out, being able to recognize, be like, I want to talk to that kid. Like that kid's a hard
yeah.
worker, which I'm sure
Oh,
like going back to your family's background, like it probably seemed like nothing, right? Like you're like, oh, you just sweep the floor. Like you just help out where you can.
yeah.
Like
That was
my
good.
yeah, yeah, oh go ahead. Yeah.
I was gonna say I just knew the janitor and I was
Yeah.
like, Jerome, like I take care of this dude, don't worry about it. Like we made the mess, we'll pick it up.
Yeah.
That's where that came from. And it's like again, just like people are people, the janitor is the janitor, like a person is a person. And if I can help someone, I'm not gonna not help them. Like
Yeah.
there's an
Yeah.
opportunity to help someone and I feel an inclination, it's like usually the right thing to do. So
Yes, yeah, yeah. Definitely usually the right thing to do. And I think that speaks to like your integrity as well of just like being a human, but also like, for us, our or fellowship focuses a lot on leadership and mentorship. And I know for each other, like we're our accountability buddies.
yes, man.
So I'm gonna try my best to explain how this even came about. But we were both there's a company called Blind Zebra here in Indianapolis. They're a partner company of Orr Fellowship, shout them out. But we both attended like virtually a was it like the business leadership conference or like some webinar, and
Hmm.
they shared like a uh personal business plan, like how to kind of mark out like your goals, your champions who can help support you, like your differentiators that like numerical and personal, things that will like help you get along with your personal business plan. So you're very entrepreneurial in spirit, always motivated, um, to like be learning more, driving yourself towards success. Um, and I would say I'm pretty similar in that way. Maybe not as
100%.
entrepreneurial in like the business aspect, but definitely in the personal development space. And so, you had reached out. You were like, I know you're on this conference too. Let's be accountability buddies. I was like, perfect. This will be great. And we've been doing it since, oh God, was it September that we started it? When did we
That
start
was
it?
like last year, yeah.
Yeah,
Coming up
right?
on a
Like
year for sure.
we're definitely in our second 6 month stint.
Third, I think.
Are we? Okay. See, this is where
Yeah.
timelines are messed up in my mind. So, okay, third. Um, and so for this like next, I guess, part of the podcast, I'd love to go over like why you think you're so driven to like develop yourself personally? Because this is a question I ask myself a lot of
Hmm.
like, why do I find there's so much fulfillment in like reading and working on this podcast and um like connecting with people, trying to learn about their stories. And I don't know if it's necessarily like I think it's from the way I was raised, um,
Hmm.
in that like my family really values bettering yourself and bettering other people. So I find a lot of fulfillment from that. But what would you say, like, if you can pinpoint, why do you think like holding yourself accountable, that integrity, like you just said, helping other people, like people are people, helping them clean up, like where do you think that comes from?
Yeah, so definitely I think a lot of it is upbringing. And there's another part for sure about the awareness of like a very human condition of the like statistical miracle that is that we are alive, able to have this conversation right now, like at this point in time. And I think I'm very familiar with the likelihood or the statistical background of me being where I am right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it just feels like way too big of an opportunity to ever squander. And that's just always like on my heart, in my mind, there with me. Because when I think about things that kind of happened in succession and other moments and um, kind of where I could have been on a detractor scale and on an accelerator scale, it's pretty wild to think about like where I am and the
Yeah.
succession of events that had to have happened in a certain way in order to be where I am now.
And I'll say it
And
too, like how successful you are and
yeah,
where you are right
yeah,
now as
it's pretty
well.
nuts.
Mm-hmm.
And I just that's a super exciting thought for me. And something that I've been really trying to like some demons I've been trying to exercise or whatever is like I've always felt like I was lazy. And I'm really trying to hone in on effort and being able to really have the tranquility with myself, like internally, my internal state saying, like, I gave a lot of effort. I worked really hard and I tried
Yeah.
my best. And whatever happens, like, it's going to happen, but there's no way for me to lose sleep at night if I know that I tried really hard. And so, I think it's those three things is like my upbringing with my family, which has to do with having a big family of blue collar workers. I mean, a lot of my family, they've had a mixed experience in life. And I've seen, some be incarcerated, some pass away, um, a lot of just different paths people took. And knowing that I was very proximal to that. Like that's not something that was super far removed. There aren't many people that are doing what I'm doing in my family that are back home. Um, and so understanding that times, which like builds into that being aware of the statistics of that occurring,
Yeah.
and then also not knowing where a ceiling is. Like I feel like there's really no ceiling. And that's crazy to think about. Like that's really, really wild to think about. And so that's what really energizes me because there, I don't see really where I can't see where things can go terribly downhill if I'm
Mm-hmm.
working hard, trying hard, putting my best foot forward, and really getting after it. So,
Yeah. Yeah. That I love that perspective. I love how you kind of like narrated on each part building on each other because I do think that's like what the essence of life is, right? Like we're always building on previous knowledge. Once we learn something else, it's like building blocks. And so one of the things that I feel like really shines through with you is your I don't know, in your intention of like always reading, always picking something up, like always trying to connect to other people, like provide value with like connect someone with someone else that'll provide value or connect them with like a podcast episode, like reference this and be like, oh, I thought about you while I was listening to this. Like you should definitely check it
Hmm.
out. Um, so I wanted to ask you, like, because I mean, I kind of envy how much reading and like how much learning you're able to do. I know you know this because I like tell you this in our accountability um coffees, but being able to like or because you've done so much reading and like you focused on mindset and you even took like your training certification course around it. I'd love if
Hmm.
you can share kind of things that you've picked up along the way. You don't necessarily have to like cite them, of course, because I didn't ask you this beforehand to like
Yeah.
bring resources prepared or like quotes or anything, but what are a couple of things that have stuck around from like learning or connecting with people?
Hmm. Yeah, there's a lot. I think a big part of this year was definitely around getting my mind right. 2021 was a very turbulent one, and I felt like I was kind of going through the motions and had a pretty big loss in my family. So dealing with that and the fallout of that, um, put me in like a pretty vulnerable headspace, and definitely fell into a lull. And I actually listened to a book on the recommendation of my cousin, and it was called The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. And I've read more and listened more about the science actually behind what this dude, Dr. Joseph Murphy, talks about. But essentially, the majority of the cognitive activity that's going on for us and what we're
Mhm.
experiencing is subject to the subconscious mind rather than our, you know, cognitive mind that we can consciously make decisions with. And it's a phenomenon that people are still trying to understand. And it's like crazy. And so there are all these like tips and tricks on how you can rewire your subconscious mind or how you can become more aware of how to influence it. And so that kind of led me down the rabbit hole of like looking more at mindset and being more intentional about the things that I was thinking about, being more intentional about the things that I value. Um, and so one of those big things was I literally just said, like, I value learning and reading. I value
Yeah.
that. I love that. Um, and began to speak about it in a manner that was like, in college, I would say like, oh yeah, I hate reading. I'm so slow at it, or it makes me tired every time. Or like reading energizes me.
Hmm.
Reading energizes me, and I believe that. Like, I love it. And just that, like, once I started doing that, I was like, damn, like, I love
It
this
is
stuff.
it is energizing me.
Yeah, it's like I'm fired up right now. Like
Look
this
at that.
learning stuff is crazy.
Yeah.
Um, and so that was like my first experience around the malleability of what we can do, like as human beings, and working with our brain and understanding our brain. So I took the course, Kevin Bailey, Dream Fuel, great people. And that just added more and more and more.
Hmm.
And that allowed me to really just get myself kind of back together and be who I wanted to be, right? Like who do I want to be? And that answer was someone who gives effort, someone who loves to learn, someone who's consistently thinking of others, who loves helping others, and like created this huge list of things um, that I wanted to be, and always made excuses that I couldn't be for X and Y and Z reason. Like I'm lazy. I can't get up in the morning. And I just decided to commit to waking up at like 4:30 in the morning and going to the gym. And it sucked. Like it sucked so bad for the first week. Uh, and then it felt like it was a season. Like my girlfriend and I were like, okay, what we do, we wake up at 4:30 and we go to the gym. And we go to the gym 6 days out of 7 days out of the week. And that's what we do. And it's just like what you believe and what you kind of tell yourself you can do. And like there's outlandish things out there, right? You'd be like, I'm gonna do X and Y and Z, I'm gonna write it in a journal and I'm gonna have $10 million by next week. Like, I mean, the likelihood of that is pretty low. But
Yeah.
if you focus really on your values and on your intentions and on who you want to be, there's so many benefits to that. And I think from a mindset perspective, that was the biggest takeaway because it's something that I'm aware of now. And if I start feeling, unstable or um feeling like I'm losing my grip on kind of my routine or on my like mental clarity, then and I'm not being good about maintaining like my journaling or kind of thoughtfulness and meditation or whatever it may be, or if I'm starting to hit a lazy spell, like then I'm aware enough now to know how to snap out of that and get back into it. Like I had been going to the gym like in the evening. I hadn't done that in a long time. And so it's like that's not what I do. And then
Yeah.
today, up at 5:30, went to the gym, like reintegrating those paths and patterns. Cause like what do? I wake up in the morning and I go to the gym. So yeah, that's how from my perspective the whole mindset thing played about. But it's really just a belief system that
Hmm.
allows you to have your operating system. And I just gave it a lot of thought and the things that I valued. It's really cool actually to hear from you that you see those things come through on the other end because it's things that I really thought about and really wanted to implement into my life to allow me to be my best version. So,
Yeah. No, I definitely see it come through. Like I love that you said you have the tools after going through the mindset training of like tools that when you're getting like when you're in a lazy spell or when you're getting off track, you like know how to get back on it. And I think maybe it's because just from studying neuroscience or just from like having done leadership courses where that is more mindset oriented or just like sports psychology, they also like give you skills to for your mentality.
mhm.
um like we're definitely aligned on that front of like I totally believe in your thoughts manifest in like so many different ways that we don't even understand like the
Mhm.
like your subconscious. And so I think that's why we drive, because it's like when I say like when I hear you say like you get up at 4:30 a.m., which I know you know I don't do but like I'm like okay, yeah, it is really if you tell yourself. For a while I was getting up in the morning and working out, which was unusual for me. But like going through that process myself and having you be a soundboard for that, I know that it influences a lot of how I see myself, how like when I'm in those moments where I'm like, oh, I haven't been on top of my life, whether it's like work or professionally or emotionally, anything, like I know it's like, oh, I can pinpoint pretty much 100% of the time like what's going on. It's like, oh, I
Yeah.
haven't intentionally created space for myself to allow myself to go to the gym. Like I've either overbooking myself, too much, spending too much time on this, or like not being efficient or not being realistic with my goals and where I'm at right now. So I definitely see that shine through. And I know just from like or fellowship in general, yes, but like our accountability, it's like, oh, I spend a lot more time being intentional because I know we keep each other accountable.
Mhm.
And so one thing that I wanted you to kind of walk through too, and this was from our last meeting, was you like the dopamine detox that you're doing, because I think
Yeah.
this is just so interesting. So I want listeners to hear. And then like also the mindless timelessness, I think is what you called it. Like walk us
Yeah.
through like what you're doing, and then we'll wrap up the episode with that, because I think it's very interesting. And I think a lot of people our age, especially like young
Mhm.
professionals, would benefit from it, but just everyone in general, because um
Yeah. 100%. So in terms of the dopamine detox, that's not anything new, but I think it's something a lot of people hear about and don't do. But I think
yeah.
it's good to do. First time I ever heard about it was in high school. So a speaker came in and talked about it, and then like he said like, yeah, I'm doing a week no phone, um, no laptop, no computer, just like chilling. And so for me, that looks like certain days on my weekend. I wasn't good this past weekend because I had to go to a lot of places and do events and stuff. But last Sunday, I was able to just leave my phone, like just leave my phone somewhere else, not turn on the TV and just hang out. And that came from a book, um, the mindlessness and timelessness came from a book by Eckhart Tolle called The Power of Now. And that book just really, really resonated with me. Um, and what he talks a lot about is like as a planetary like species or like the ecosystem of Earth and like thinking about the interrelatedness of everything, really playing on that is you can feel the energy of a tree outside and like feel the energy of the grass growing. And one of his points is like, if you ask an owl or a bird, like, hey, what time is it? Not only like can they not understand because they can't speak, but if we could speak to wild animals or to anyone else, it's like they would not understand even remotely like what time it is. And
Mm,
the other point he touches on is like your mind, right? So what he believes is there is a you, like a spirit and energy, and then there is a mind. And what he's talking about is your mind is living out basically like a movie, but if you're able to really pull like your consciousness back and see what you're thinking, based on the thoughts that you pop up, like, my girlfriend just called the dogs. Like, what's going on? That's like, that's a thought. That's not me being focused on exactly what's in front of me, but I'm
yeah.
aware that I had a thought. And so once you reach the ability to be aware that you are thinking, then you can see what you're thinking about. And so stepping outside of that then allows you to say, like, all right, well, let's quiet the mind. Like, we're just not going to think about anything right now and just hang out. And so I'll find myself like hanging with my dogs, just laughing, like experiencing them and like they're psychotic dogs. But
Gotta love them.
um, yeah, love them dearly. And it's just
Yeah.
quality experience. I was very tempted to say quality time, but like the other thing he talks about is, there is like time is a construct that puts constraints on you to like stress you out, and there are logistical aspects of time, right? But overall, like if you can separate yourself from your mind and separate yourself from your time, it's pretty weird. Like sometimes it goes fast, sometimes it goes slow, but it's just an opportunity to really clear everything going on up there, and allows for a good level set. So dopamine
Mhm.
detox definitely allows you to better prepare yourself to have those kind of moments. Um, but yeah, Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, crazy, crazy book. And it's been good for me so far. I mean, I feel like it's helping out for sure. So
More quality experiences with your
yeah.
dogs. No, I feel like that's a perfect, albeit somewhat trippy, like way to look at life, like looking at pulling yourself from your consciousness. It's like it creates such a interesting like visual in my mind. But I think that's a wonderful note to leave people with in that great read, one, sounds like. I know it's on my list
Yes.
that you've provided me with. Um, but just the idea of being able to pull yourself away from your phone to better optimize yourself to like have those mindless and timelessness experiences and just be like
Mhm.
super present, and detach like your present emotions and feelings and experience from like thoughts that are running throughout your head is super interesting. And I think a lot of people are gonna hopefully listen to that and like see how it applies to their to their life. But this has been so much fun, Mondo.
Yeah,
I've
definitely.
absolutely loved just having you as a friend, as a mentor, um, as an accountability buddy, and now being a guest on my podcast host, or
Yes.
being a guest on my podcast and hosting you here today. It's been wonderful. So thank you for making the time to do so and just being so intentional.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. Always good chatting. And yeah, really appreciative of the opportunity. And I am well aware of how crazy the books sound and how wild the ideas are, but they've been working for me. Multiple books on them. Some other ones are like The Surrender Experiment and The Untethered Soul by Michael Stringer. Um, and yeah, like it's pretty weird. It's pretty weird stuff to think about, but I mean, it's brought us together and we're here
Exactly.
and having a good experience. So
Yeah.
might as well
Kind of
enjoy
love like that it's
it.
so out of body and meta. Like that's what makes it fun, right? Um, so yeah, that's phenomenal. Okay. Well, until next time, thank you, Mondo.
Sweet.